I've been happy to see more discussion in Discord lately than had happened in the last year or two.
I've been trying to go in every day and at least leave a comment.
Yeah, that's good. Shall we get going? Maybe it's a little short, but
That's good. I think you're good to go.
okay. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit, just kind of for the record, about how I use TaskWarrior. I've been using it for like 15 years, 15, yeah, a long time. Um, and I use it mostly as a way to get to the getting things done um, kind of ethos philosophy. So it makes sure that I do the things I'm responsible for. I want to be the kind of person that if you ask me to do something and I agree, it gets done. Maybe not right away, but at an appropriate time. It keeps me getting anxious for the things I'm responsible for because at work or at home I might have a lot of those, and it helps me not get lost trying to focus on just the hot priority thing. I notice that some people I work with, like they have a set of bugs assigned to them and they work on one for a month at a time, when these others are probably pretty quick and would unblock other people. And kind of mixing slightly lower priority and higher priority things is really kind of a better way to work. So I use it for my home stuff and I use it at work. And I have a bunch of aliases and views set up, and I won't talk about all of these. I have a gist actually that I've written up that has like a pretty detailed summary of how I use TaskWarrior that I've used to share with my coworkers before. But I will share. Let's see how I can do this. Just this view. So this is my this. I use a terminal tmux so that I can switch terminals, and this is always in my first terminal. So this is my current today list. So these are things that are either due today or before today, and you can see I'm a little behind on my system updates here. Um, and I have a bunch of other um, task lists as well. So I have a triage one. I'm not going to show the rest of them because I don't really know if there's anything embarrassing in there at the moment. Um, but I have a triage. So on a weekly-ish basis, one of these tasks will be triage other tasks, and that kind of shows me all the tasks with a couple filters removed for things that I don't need to look at every week. So I might find something that I didn't want to do last week, but now maybe I'll be able to find some time to do that this weekend. I also use due and recurring tasks quite a lot. So you can see this one, Charlie Revolution. That's my cat, one of my cats, and he needs to get his revolution on the first of the month. So that comes up every month and just reminds me, and that'll stay in the task list until I do it. Um, Pretty straightforward stuff there. At work, I sync using Bug Warrior, which Ryan is the current maintainer of. Um, to When I worked at Mozilla, I sync to Bugzilla, I sync it to GitHub, and I sync it to stuff at my current job as well. So if a ticket gets assigned to me, it shows up in TaskWarrior. If a review request gets assigned to me, it shows up in TaskWarrior. And those are, kind of at work, those are the main things that I'm expected to be doing in a timely fashion. So those automatically get sorted in there, and I can kind of handle them from there. If I'm not going to do a review today, maybe I'll set it to wait until tomorrow or Monday or something. Um, so I use tags to be able to find things, and I use the next tag and the today tag and stuff like that to filter. I use priorities a little bit. I use due dates and recurrence just to make sure that I have a list that's about this size that I want to look at on a day-to-day basis. And if this is getting to 15 or 20 tasks, then I start thinking, which of these can I admit right now that I'm not doing today, and I'll just set the wait flag on those till tomorrow and think about them tomorrow. And if the list gets pretty short or on this weekly basis, I'll go back into the triage and say, was there something really low priority that I could drop in here? Maybe I have an extra hour at work. I'll go look for a ticket that was a very low priority ticket, but maybe it would only take me an hour, and maybe bring that up. Add the today tag. It'll appear here. I'll work on it. Hopefully, be done with it. So the reason I think it's interesting to look at this particular approach to TaskWarrior because number one, this is when I came to TaskWarrior, I both wanted something like this and also sort of read the docs in TaskWarrior and was like, oh, this is a great command line tool for this specific approach to organizing one's time and one's efforts. This getting things done. It's not quite to the book. I haven't read the book, but that idea of like focus on a couple things that you can do right now and try and not focus on the rest of it. Um, and also, there was a recent comment on GitHub on the TaskWarrior repo regarding handling millions of tasks. And Ryan called out that I said TaskWarrior is built at a human scale. And maybe this is part of why I sort of fundamentally believe that is I think this is TaskWarrior's core purpose is handling. I have a couple hundred tasks that are active or waiting or pending. I think that's TaskWarrior's core. I think if you have a million tasks in your to-do list, you're kind of doing it wrong. Or probably a better way to say it is you're solving a different problem than TaskWarrior was built for.
Yes.
And maybe TaskWarrior can work for you, but it's not built for that. And maybe some of the feature requests that would come out of wanting to handle a million tasks are going to be something that we don't want to do because we don't want to prioritize toward that at the expense of being able to efficiently handle 100 tasks. So maybe that gives a little bit of color to why I think that, and maybe Ryan suggested that we could think about updating the philosophy page in the docs to say, like, this is kind of what we're aiming for. So that's what I do, and that's kind of why it's linked. It's relevant today to look at that.
I think that's terrific. Thank you for sharing that, Dustin.
Sure.
Something I was wondering about there, Dustin, you mentioned that you use a terminal that always has it open on the first version of the terminal. You said that was Tmux, I think.
Yeah, Tmux.
Does that just, do you have it set up to automatically come up when your computer just turns on? Is that how you've got it going there?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I mostly sleep the laptop, so it's rare
Sure.
that it turns on. But yeah, I have a Tmux basically lets you have multiple terminals in different, and you can switch between them. They're just numbered. So terminal 0 always has that kind of split screen with my tasks at the top, and then just a regular shell at the bottom. And I mostly type task commands in there. And if I'm going to go work on something, I'll open another window to go work on that thing. So if I'm working on TaskWarrior, there's another Tmux window with TaskWarrior in it, and I can always switch back to 0 to see what was I working on. Oh yeah, that's the active task. If I get distracted, or maybe I'm stuck on this, I'm going to wait this task for a couple hours or till tomorrow and find something else to work on that I can feel more productive on. And the
I
same
like
thing.
that workflow. I need to do something like that for myself so that it's always open. And you've given me the idea to kind of there are maybe 3 or 4 apps that I would like to just have instant access to like that, always on my computer instead of like having to go and open it and find a window for it and stuff like that. So you've given me some stuff to think about there. Thanks.
Cool. And I put the link to the gist that I mentioned in the call chat that talks a little bit more about how I set this up and has the scripts I use to make that kind of ever refreshing task list at the top.
That's really amazing. Thank you. Matt, are you willing to show your setup at the next meeting?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. Cool. All right, so next thing on our agenda was progress from the last 2 weeks that's worth highlighting. Dustin, I'm afraid that's back to you again.
And I don't know if I have a comprehensive list. I can say what I've worked on the last 2 weeks, which is mainly running through the list of bugs and trying to do a little bit of triage on those.
Great.
So I added some. So I really haven't written any code. I've only reviewed a couple smallish things that I can remember. But I know I'm leaving out work that other people have done. So I apologize for that. I added some tags for topics, so like recurrence as a topic, time management as a topic, and a couple others, mostly because they're topics I don't really know about. I don't know the details of how TaskWarrior parses times and figures out what the middle of the second to next week is. Like all those abbreviations, I have no idea how they work. So hopefully if someone is into those things and kind of wants to make the world better, that part of the world better, at least we've got a pile of tickets that they can look at and say, okay, I've learned how this code works. Now here are some places I can apply that knowledge. I was also looking for things that were sort of old and could be closed. And also things that were probably important to solve and we should have on our radar. So the things that we should have on our radar, I moved into the project, which is really, I'm just using as a way of kind of having a smaller list of issues that I want to think about. And one of the interesting things about doing this is you find a 3 or 4 year old bug that has had no action for that time, and you comment to say like, we're probably not going to do this, and here's a reasonable reason to not do it. And suddenly there's all this activity on the issue. So, I mean, it's kind of fun to do that. And one of those was the handling multiple millions of tasks issue. So sometimes you get interesting conversations out of that, and sometimes someone sort of manages to make a good argument. Maybe even sometimes you get someone to contribute to something to say, well, actually, if you don't think you're going to work on this, maybe I'll make a PR. You're like, yes, victory. But that we didn't. I don't think we got to a PR in any of those. So I probably touched about half of the open bugs. There's 406 open issues right now. I probably touched about 200 of them. But I think I skimmed the list enough that I had found anything that we need to think about. So the next step is thinking about what we want to do, what I should focus on for the 3.1 for the next release, which I would think would be 3.1. Hopefully we'll get some actual functionality and not just bug fixes, which means we'll change the middle digit. But I didn't actually pick any issues for that. So I guess I would invite both of you and anyone who's listening to kind of look through the TaskWarrior 3 project and either find some themes that you think we should work on and maybe pull some issues from that, or some specific issues that you think really need to get fixed in the next release. But probably we should pick one theme, whether that's sort of fixing performance is one option there. Deleting tasks. There's competing bugs of one person who really wants us to be able to really wants task purge to get rid of data, and another person who's really upset that they perceive that TaskWarrior is deleting data without their permission. Found out due to another bug, it's not. So some people really want to delete data, and some people really don't want to delete data. And we can make them both happy, but it needs some work. So maybe we should do that for 3.1. And there's a couple other sort of thematic things in this project that we could probably pull out and think of in doing 3.1. The fact that I haven't gotten to write any code means that 3.1 is probably not coming in the next 2 weeks, but that's where we're at.
And with a volunteer project, people, given what time they have, I think it's reasonable to expect longer release times, right?
Yeah. I was thinking options for releases really are sort of timed releases, like we could do every month or every 2 months or something like that. Feature targeted releases where we say we're going to release when we finish this feature, or just sort of we've made some progress, let's do a release. Based releases, and the last can happen fairly quickly, right? We could make a release after every pull request that we merge if we wanted to. But the release for TaskWarrior is a little bit complicated and puts a lot, because it's packaged by all these repos or downstream distros. That puts a lot of burden. If we release every week with really trivial changes, that puts a lot of burden on other people. So I don't think we want to do that. And because of what you just said, I think a scheduled release is not a great idea. So I think the middle option there, where we're kind of saying this is the basic feature that we'd like to get done next. Let's schedule that for the next release and try to focus. People who are able to focus able to choose what they focus on, ideally would focus on the thing we're leaning toward there. And then when that's done and ready, then we'll make a release. And that doesn't preclude other work. If someone wants to come along and work on bash or shell completion for Z shell or something like that, like we're not going to say no, we're not putting that in the next release. Happy to merge that whenever it goes in the next release. If someone comes along and does some great cool project that really deserves a release right away, we can also just change the definition of the next release. So it's not precluding any work, but at least gives us kind of a structure to think about what's next, what the people who are around the project continuously should think about, and then what kind of timing we can give for when the next release might come. I'm happy to be argued with, but that was my reasoning for picking this kind of approach to releasing.
To me, that sounds very reasonable. Matt, what do you think?
Look at the mute button. That sounds good to me. I've got to admit, like full disclosure here, I'm relatively new to working on projects like this. I used to be an actuary, and now I'm getting into development right now. So like that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in working on this project. I've used TaskWarrior personally for a number of years, and I'm like, oh, I'd like to find a way to contribute, start giving back. So although it sounds reasonable to me, this is not my wheelhouse quite yet. So that's my opinion.
Gotcha. I've been doing this sort of thing for quite a while, so the kind of those sort of overviews of like how you can run a project, I've have some familiarity with running lots of things in different ways. So, but yeah, I appreciate your help on actually like working toward specific things. And I think if there's areas of TaskWarrior that you're interested in that you don't feel like you're giving a lot of focus, like one of those that came up was command line parsing. Ryan was involved in an issue where we thought it was a Z shell issue, but I don't think it is. But one way of writing the command line does something different than another one, and it's just based on shell quoting.
Oh.
I don't know why they're different. I would expect them to be the same. I don't have time to dive into that code. So as an example, if you wanted to dive into the shell parsing code and sort of become the expert on that, or if you want to look into how times are parsed and handled, or any of these kind of corners of TaskWarrior and become an expert, they might be a smaller, more manageable bit that you could understand, and also you'd be the resident expert on that thing pretty quickly. So that might be a direction to lean.
Sure. Yeah, a good idea to lean into. I have been spending my time over the last I hesitate to change the subject here, but I have been working on some things with the TaskWarrior website. So that's where I have been looking into and like not if not becoming an expert, at least like guiding some attention towards that over the last couple of weeks. But we could table that for later in this discussion.
Well, that's great to hear. I don't really understand the relationship between TaskWarrior and TimeWarrior. I mean, I understand that they're both things that people in GBF work on, but beyond that, I know there's some sort of software links between them. Do you know anything about those?
I know also that there's like just you can tie them together and get TimeWarrior and TaskWarrior to play nicely with one another. However, the details I'm not aware of. I don't personally use any of those integrations myself. I keep them like manually separated and just use them individually. So over the last couple of weeks, I've not been working on the app, the TimeWarrior app itself, but rather working on getting a way to tie the documentation updates to the website updates.
Gotcha. Cool, great. I think that's important work. The website's a little out of sync, so happy to hear that.
I use the TaskWarrior to TimeWarrior hook, and so when I'm working on client projects, I start I use Vit instead of the command line. So you can start the timer on a task. That sends a start message to TimeWarrior. And then when I stop the task, that sends the completion time to TimeWarrior. And then you get a nice little summary of the daily list. Each item in or each project description and tag is sent as a tag in TimeWarrior. And so then you can search for, I want all the tags for the project name this in this date range, and then you get a nice list of you were working on it from this time to this time on these dates and that sort of thing.
Yeah, on my TaskWarrior list, I have an item that just says like get more comfortable with using both of these together. So that's a clue in the direction of how I might start using them together. But I like having these records.
Cool. Well,
So
I don't have anything else. Sorry, go ahead.
So Matt, where are you in that website project? Are you almost finished, or are you about halfway through, just starting?
I'm finished with a working version of making it so that when the TimeWarrior docs are updated in its repo, it can go and automatically populate that update in the website. It is not yet deployed. I have a working version of like a clone of all of it on my side. However, because I've never gone in and deployed something on like a production system before, I kind of want to work alongside with Thomas and have my handheld as I go through and like actually deploy it. So for example, one possible stumbling block that I foresee happening here is I needed to get some, I think they're called personal access tokens, working on my side, like on my version of the two repos that I've got. And I wonder where we should how we should get that personal access token. Like, should it belong to an individual, or should it belong to the organization on GitHub? I'm not sure about that. And also just like getting the code changed to reflect like, oh, this belongs to, if we do it with the GitHub institution, or excuse me, organization, then maybe like some code changes will need to happen. I'm not sure about that. But anyways, like just like small things like that, I'd like to get a second pair of eyes on before I go and deploy it. I was given access to the two, I guess, either to the relevant organization or to the two relevant repositories. That is the TimeWarrior repo and the TimeWarrior.net repo. So in theory, I can go do it myself, but in practice, I don't want to crash things. So to summarize that, I have it working, but I haven't deployed it yet.
Sounds good. Yeah, I was mostly asking about in order to find out whether you're looking for more tasks or whether you're good for right now. So
I am also working on another issue that Thomas pointed me to, which is a kind of a modernization of the TimeWarrior.net tools filtering. So you may know, and this could become relevant for the TaskWarrior website as well. I'm not sure what the vision for that is. I've exclusively been focusing on TimeWarrior stuff right now. However, what I'm working on right now is on the tools/extensions page. There's a sidebar that does the filtering through like what languages are available and also who is the writer of the project. And what I'm working on is a React-based solution to make it a little bit more streamlined. So right now, like all of the languages appear as checkmark boxes, and we'd like them to appear as a combo box. So it's like much more streamlined there. So that's a work in progress.
sounds good. Dustin, back to you. What do you think we should aim for the next 2 weeks? What's on your agenda?
Um, I'd like to figure out what the next release looks like, and based on kind of what the biggest fire is, if you will, what's most needed, and then try to find some time to work on that. And I think I need to figure out whether I want to try to work on something, um, because every time I sit down to work on TaskWarrior, there's a bunch of emails, notifications I've gotten from GitHub, and then I get into issues. And I feel like I'm doing productive things, but they're not actually progressing toward a new release. And maybe I need to try to do less of that and try and pick like this. Okay, this is the issue I'm going to work on, and when I find an hour in the evening after work, that's the thing I'm going to focus on, and not trying to read through the emails carefully. So I guess I need to figure that out, because I think if I try to continue to just keep up with notifications, I'm probably not. We'll probably be in the same spot in 2 weeks, which is we've got a bunch of issues. We should probably solve them and make a release. Yeah, and in some sense, I kind of want to be in that holding pattern just to see if sometimes just leaving an issue that seems urgent out there with no action is a way to sort of attract people to come and say, oh, maybe I could work on this, or maybe I can help on this. So that's part of why I'm thinking this kind of project gardening is useful, is because it's setting out some kind of attractive targets for people to work on. But also we need to make progress. So yeah, I probably need to figure out a better way to balance those two things in my time. I don't think we'll get to a 3.1 release. I don't think any of the kind of major things that need to get done right now are going to get fixed in 2 weeks. But but maybe I can get started on some of those during that time and have something to show in terms of technical progress.
Sounds terrific. And I will continue to plug away at building the interactions on GitHub and on uh, I want to say Discord. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Discord. I think that's starting to work, and
Yeah.
we're seeing more action. So I'll keep working on that.
Great. Yeah, that's been really nice to see. So thank you for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the end of our formal agenda. If you guys want to hang around and talk, feel free to do that. But if not, if you've got other things you need to do, feel free to go do that as well.
I do have a little time this week if either of you want to say anything further, but
Yeah, thanks for that, Wesley. And a little bit more on the Discord stuff. One of the things I think it was I think it was Thomas B that brought this up with respect to the Discord maybe 2 meetings ago, is that, or somebody brought it up, that there are tons of channels there, and I have since went into the Discord and was like overwhelmed by the possibilities for where to possibly interact. Might it be appropriate to just like start culling some of those Discord channels, and perhaps adding new ones as a conversation grows around a particular topic? What do you guys think about that?
I also think that most of those channels have been opened and never used. So culling those in particular would create no negative consequences, right? But I don't have any access to, like, admin access to do something like that. So
Who would we need to talk to do that, or was it that other contributor that set up Discord that is now gone?
I really don't know.
I'll make a note to see how that happens. I've not worked too much with Discord, so I don't know how easy that'd be, but I will look into that and let you guys know what I find.
It was Thomas that gave us the link to the Discord server, so he may have insight. And since you're working with him, maybe give him a poke.
Okay, got it.
to your earlier question, Matt, about whether to have a PAT tied to a person or an organization, I think an organization makes a lot more sense for this reason, that over years people go away or become inaccessible, and that becomes problematic because you forget that they own that PAT, right? And then 2 years later they delete it, or they close their GitHub account, and suddenly everything stops working and you're in trouble. So
that was sort of my instinct. I didn't know whether it was possible. I intuited like this has got to be a thing, but it's good to hear that is actually like the both possible and like probably the best practice there. Thank you.
Yeah. And I know for Task Cluster, which I worked on at Mozilla, well, at one point our docs went down because someone who had quit the project and quit at Mozilla like 3 years earlier went and cleaned up his Netlify account, and just like the docs stopped working because it had worked fine for 3 years, right? But also we had a GitHub user that's just called Task Cluster, and it owned a lot of the things, and we shared credentials for that user, but we could go in and create a new access token or anything like that when we needed. So maybe we just need a Gutenberg Bitfactory user or a TaskWarrior user, a GitHub user with that name that owns these things. That I think that's an acceptable use of GitHub. I don't think that's against their AUP to have a sort of bot user like that.
Okay, got it. Yeah, when I was looking into how part of the website is changed right now, and like using some of the other GitHub actions that exist as inspiration for the one that I just finished up, I did notice that there is a personal access token that belongs to somebody, probably the organization. I didn't look any deeper than that, but you're giving me the idea right now that I could perhaps just copy that one. So that's something to look into later on. And that could get me one step closer to just deploying the solution myself if that becomes necessary.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. When you're new to something like this, like I am, everything's like, oh, I got to handle this like it's red hot lava or something like that. Whereas later on, it's like, oh, you just like start flinging this PAT around like this. I'll get used to it eventually, but right now it's still kind of let's say thrilling to work with.
I think there's another kind of perspective on that, which is kind of thinking about the risk profiles for an open source project, and like, what if I do this wrong and break the website? Like, okay, that seems bad. People are probably going to be a little bit cranky about it, but ultimately, it doesn't matter, right? And if it means the difference between days worth of work and a couple minutes worth of work for you, with the risk of breaking the website, like, might as well do it. Maybe not the same if you work, for Facebook, and like you take Facebook down because you wanted to get something done before lunch. Like, maybe that's bad, right? But translating that into an open source project doesn't. It changes the situation quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the calculus around us shipping 3.0 too. It turns out to maybe have been a little bit wrong, but right, it was okay. Maybe we'll break some stuff, but maybe that's not the end of the world. We're not going to get fired. And there's been other projects that I've made decisions like that with. When I was working on BuildBot, I deleted the entire test suite because the tests failed for no reason quite a lot. And I was sort of like, these aren't giving us any value. Just rm-rf, the test suite, and then worked for a couple months on writing new tests. And people were really, really cranky with me. Like, why did you delete the test? What are you thinking? But 2 years later, that seemed like a really good decision. So, yeah, so I think kind of making these decisions in the moment and then thinking about the broader perspective can make it feel sort of less worrisome. And again, to your question about should I use a personal access token, like if you do build one, make one for your account, and then next year you're working on something else and you don't remember that PAT and you delete it and the website stops updating, big deal, right? Like, we'll all have learned something, but it's not the end of the world.
Sure. This is something that I'm really glad to have gotten your opinion on this, because I was thinking like, oh no, if I take the website down, it is the end of the world. But clearly that's not actually true. So
Right.
Thank you for that. Yeah, good.
It also tends to get the attention of people who can bring it back up, right? Like, Thomas would probably be like, "You broke the website. I fixed it." You're like, "Thanks."
And the other thing is, when you pushed out 3, we got all kinds of people coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Any press is good press. Some way.
In some way. And Matt, I would say that there's also, I think in terms of standard operating procedures, right? Once you've done it a couple of times, you have that procedure at least in your head, if not written down, and that decreases your risk level significantly as well, right?
You just start getting used to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. And yeah, by going to do this right now, that'll like hasten the timeline of me getting more used to it. So yeah, that's good advice. I like this.
The first change, I just started working on Chrome like a year and a half ago, and you make a change in Chrome and it ships to like well over 1 billion people. That can be a little intimidating. But like Wesley just said, like at this point, yeah, I just make changes to Chrome every week. But the first few were like, this better be right. This really has to be right.
I'll get there. I'm brand new to this stuff, so I was happy to find a little niche to work on a couple of things here on TaskWarrior and TimeWarrior. So one step at a time. Ship to 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, and so on.
Mm.
Cool.
There you go.